All right. So, what are some of the pros and cons of having off-ledger remediation for a potential US CBDC system, right? And basically, what do we mean by remediation, and what exactly does it mean to be off-ledger, right? Because these are terms that, maybe some people who watch these videos don't really understand. So I kind of wanted to kind of give them a little bit of definition. So, according to the Office of Science and Technology in a recent paper that they published, remediation refers to the ability to fix mistakes made with the CBDC system, such as transactions that occurred accidentally or fraudulently, right? And basically, having this off ledger means that remediation would be retroactively ordered, right? So, in the previous video of on ledger remediation, basically this whole process was of, say for example, you accidentally sent someone money or whatever, or the wrong person. Remediation is what takes care of that, right? So basically you would get either on ledger, or for on ledger remediation, that transaction would be voided before final settlement and you're good. The funds never left your account, whatever. Off ledger remediation means that most likely that those funds are already settled, and basically they'd undo that transaction by having another transaction that goes in the opposite direction, right? Basically undoes that transaction on a kind of total basis, we'll say, completing both, right? So with that being said, what you would kind of see with this, we'll say intermediaries, right, would be basically settling the disputes and conducting these, we'll call them chargebacks, which would basically be equivalent to the incorrectly transacted amount, which is kind of what I was giving with the example. And so you could also see this with courts mandating intermediaries to close accounts, to give another example of this type of intermediation, right? Again, all kind of talked about, at least briefly to some extent, in the paper I referenced, which will have a link in the description to the actual PDF of the paper so you guys can read it for yourself and discuss it and so on, if you so choose or want to in general. So what are some of the kind of pros and cons of having this off-ledger remediation to begin with? And so contrary to on-ledger remediation, which we talked about before, off-ledger remediation, the settlement would most likely be faster because you don't have, say, a time period or remediation window between the initiation of the transaction and final settlement, right? And so you don't have that window, settlement's faster, so on. So this would be advantageous from a financial inclusion perspective, as kind of defined and, we'll say, argued for from the Office of Science and Technology from this paper itself. And you also see this with other entities, basically any form of, we'll say, government type entity that discusses CBDCs specifically about or for financial inclusion, kind of argues for it in this way, right? Basically, having faster settlement itself would give the funds to people who, as they say very often, live paycheck to paycheck faster, right? If not immediately with, say, FedNow or whatever it happens to be, right? And so keeping that in mind. So also, this would make it easier to improve the payment system in general, specifically the CBDC system, because you don't have to worry about incorporating a potential remediation process for every transaction whenever you try to innovate or improve the system in general, or even update it, whatever it happens to be, right? There's one less step you have to worry about because it's kind of separate in and of itself, right? You don't have to incorporate it in the improvements, we'll say. So one of the drawbacks of this is because the remediation process is not kind of centralized to, we'll say, just the central bank. This could be taken over by intermediaries, which leads us to the potential for peer-to-peer transactions to where you don't have an intermediary there. And peer-to-peer transactions have been talked about in the papers themselves. And so it may or may not happen with the CBDC. If we'll say if one is to be implemented, again, we're kind of going into the realm of opinion, so to say. And kind of, would peer-to-peer transactions, defeat their purpose for a potential US CBDC? I'll leave that to you guys to decide and discuss. That's what the comment section is for, to kind of put that, I guess, classic YouTube plug in there, whatever it happens to be. But just in general, adding off-ledger remediation seems like it could be more challenging for the system in general, right? Whether it be through improvements or just functionality in that respect. Now, it could be easier in terms of the governance, or I'm sorry, it could be harder in terms of governance for the system, just because it's not centralized. You have more entities that can do it, and it might get more, we'll say, personalized per intermediary, or it could just be regulated, add more regulation, and kind of in that respect to where I guess it would more or less kind of reflect the classic commercial banking system that we already have, right? And so with that in mind, I'll put a card for the on-ledger remediation video to go more in depth on that up in the top right, and make sure to subscribe and comment and all the typical YouTube stuff. You know, I guess it really helps out. But also, I just kind of enjoy the engagement, and the whole point of these videos is to provoke the discussion to begin with. So with that being said, I hope to see you guys in the next video.